Thanks so much for tuning in to Talk Erie and the Joel Natale Show. We are live from our Kingdom Financial Group studio here at 5th and State, also live on Facebook and on YouTube. We're having the crucial conversations that Erie needs. And this week is a special week at the Jefferson Educational Society. It's they're theming it Moments That Shaped America, a Nation and Independence at 250. And today we're talking to Gary Walters and Stewart McLaurin. Gary is the former White House Chief Usher of the Executive Residence. Welcome, Gary. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And we have presidential historian Stewart McLaurin, again, as part of the White House Historical Association. Stewart, welcome.
Thank you, Joel. Wonderful to be with you.
All righty. We are a family show. We like to get origin stories here. And so we'll start with you, Gary. Where did you grow up? How did you come up? And love to get the trajectory that makes you an usher in the executive residence.
I was in the right place at the right time.
Is that what it was?
That's what it amounts to. I was born in Maryland, in the upper northwest of Maryland, Cumberland, Maryland, not far south of Pittsburgh. And my folks...
That's very different than Beltway, Maryland, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, about as far away as you can get. Not quite as far as Erie, but quite a ways away. But very early on, I think I was 6 years old. My parents moved to Washington, D.C. area, and I've been in the Washington, D.C. area ever since. Went to the University of Maryland for my college degree and went into the military. And
what was your branch?
Army.
Okay.
And volunteered actually for the draft. I had a very ill grandfather, and I ended up being a chauffeur. He came down with tuberculosis early on, and I was doing a shuttle service from Washington and Cumberland to Baltimore, where they had a major tuberculosis facility. And I just was not able to keep up with my schoolwork, so I went into the military, volunteered for the draft. Didn't go to Vietnam, ended up going to Europe for 2 years. And when I came out, I had qualified for officer candidate school, became a military officer early on in my career. And when I came out, found out about a expansion of the old White House police force, which was a force that took care of the White House and its environs, right in the immediate case. And at that
different than what the Secret Service would do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They were a independent organization that protected the president's house and the surrounding 18 acres. Actually, the Secret Service, of course, took care of the protection of the president and their family. Well, at that time, where Congress... with everything that was going on in the world, there were attacks on embassies around the world, and the Congress decided to expand the Secret Service's responsibilities and protect the foreign missions divisions, embassies in the Washington metropolitan area. And they decided to incorporate the old White House police because they had expertise in building security.
Sure. And
they were expanding. I applied, was in the right place at the right time, and I was in class number 4 of many, that 100 men in each and women in each class. And I joined in 1970 and spent 5 years as a police officer at the White House, and found out about an operation during that time or an opening, I should say, in the usher's office, which is an office that takes care of the president's home and the surrounding grounds. And I thought that would be a wonderful opportunity. Over the 5 years that I'd been there as a police officer, I'd become known to the people there, and I thought it would be an opportunity for me to advance. I had just finished college, going to night school, and got a business degree. Once again, in the right place at the right time. Wow. The person that was taking care of the finances for the residents had retired, so I was in the right place. I was chosen by my predecessor, Mr. Rex Scouten, who was the chief usher at the time, to become an assistant usher, and I joined the usher's office in 1976, the bicentennial year.
Fantastic.
of our country, and
Gerald Ford.
and had a year incomparable with the White House and the involvement of the 200th anniversary of our country's Constitution and what transpired during that time with all the heads of state that were coming to Washington and all the activities that were going on. So that's how I began at the White House.
Stewart, I want you to weigh in on this because I don't think, and again, here I am, pretty educated person. I never think about the absolute infrastructure. It's basically a mid-sized company to run the White House.
Well, Gary, when I moved to Washington during the Reagan presidency, Gary was then and is now still an icon himself, such an important part of White House history and the fabric of the place, the institution. And what you reference is 100 or so people who dedicate their career and their lives to making that home, that office, that place, that building operate 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And their primary customer is the president and his family. And Gary did that in a brilliant way over how many presidencies, Gary? Seven American presidencies.
Are we talking, if we needed to put a budget on what the White House operation, if it was White House Incorporated, is this a couple $1 billion operation?
Initially it was. It, of course, with inflation that has affected all of us, it is increased over the years.
Yeah.
But
it's starting to knock on Fortune 500 levels here.
The executive residence staff was pretty much took care of all the food and beverage activities that occurred at the White House, took care of all the maintenance that occurred at the White House. We had plumbers, carpenters, painters, electricians that also set up for all the presidential events and the activities that went on there. And then the staff that set up the house each day, Tuesday through Saturday, for the tourists who come through.
Sure.
With ropes and stanchions and carpet protectors and those kinds of things. And then we had a staff of curators. The calligraphers worked for the usher's office. And so I also supervised the 23 men that were on the National Park Service staff that took care of the grounds. So it was a pretty active place. And we did have a wonderful troop of people over the years who worked for the presidency, not the president, because we all stayed on. We worked at the pleasure of the president. If I one day wore a red tie to work and the president didn't like red ties and said, "You're out of here," that would be the case. Because the White House, and one of the reasons I wrote the book was to have people informed about the White House from something other than just a political entity. Mm-hmm. It's the home of our families, the President of the United States and his family for 4, 8 years, whatever the term is. And our job was to make the President, the First Lady, and his family as comfortable as possible, regardless of party, no politics involved, do our job and make the President the first in the world.
I'm interested in getting both of your perspectives. If I feel like the White House and the back office of the White House, your office and they're the subject of pop culture these days. We've had the movie The Butler, right? There was a short mini series, I think it was on Netflix or one of the streamers, about a murder in the White House. I mean, it's pretty active in pop culture right now.
Well, we have sort of a love-hate relationship with these series.
I bet you.
So many of them, they're blowing up the White House and doing all these destructive things.
Right.
I think the series that you're referencing most recently is The Residence, which was a Netflix series, and the set design for that was extraordinarily accurate and down to every little detail. And they had a consultant, a former young woman who worked in the chief usher's office, that was helping them say, no, that's not right, this would be more accurate. And so, they're interesting series. I love the fact that they increase interest in the White House itself, and it is a building and an office and a home and a museum and all of these things, but they can really take license with reality a little bit.
I would imagine. Yeah. Do you sometimes kind of shake your head when you see
frequently.
some of this stuff?
The very first time I watched the show West Wing,
Yes.
I watched the first 5 minutes of it, and one of the first opening scenes, they had these people walking down the halls of the West Wing, and they were like, it was like Grand Central Station. And I turned it off, and I never watched it again. And I said I wasn't going to watch any of those kind of things because the halls in the West Wing are very narrow, and nobody's in the halls. They're working.
Right. Yeah.
And so the theatrics of what has to be to keep people's attention is not necessarily what the presidency is all about.
One more question before we go to break. Talk about the relationship of the Chief Usher and the Chief of Staff.
The relationship with the Chief of Staff is minimal, actually, because the Chief Usher works for the President and the First Lady. And so the political aspect of it is at arm's length. The President tells me what he wants, and I take care of it. And the First Lady tells me what she wants, and I take care of it with the staff who's dedicated to protecting them and providing things for them.
That's not what I expected.
No, there is a whole political apparatus that executes the president's agenda and the policy agenda of the White House and the executive branch, but this is a set-aside element of service, and that is set aside for the president and the first family. It's a very special thing. And, Gary can speak much more first person to this than I can, but the integrity of the confidentiality of these roles throughout time, and that they are there, and you even had wonderful generations of families that would work in the White House, and it would be totally confidential. They left at work everything that they said and did and saw at work.
We're talking about the modern White House. The program tonight is From FDR to Trump, Life in the Modern White House, 7 o'clock at the Jefferson. Gary Walters, Stewart McLaurin are with us here, taking our first break here on Talk Erie. It is 4:21. Talk Erie and the Joel Natale Show. Gary Walters, the longest-serving chief usher of the White House. Stewart McLaurin, he is a presidential historian here. I got to hear this Barbara Bush story here. Go ahead, Gary.
We were talking off air about the circumstance with Barbara Bush. When she was in the White House, from time to time, she wouldn't have any of her grandchildren around. And I tried to involve my daughter frequently in activities at the White House. And on the 4th of July, we went up on the roof of the White House to watch the fireworks. No better place in Washington to watch the fireworks than the roof of the White House. And there was a light rain falling, and I had an umbrella up over my daughter standing beside me and over myself. And as the fireworks started, a hand came up from behind my shoulder and grabbed the umbrella and pulled it over. My daughter and Mrs. Bush had the umbrella in her hand. And she looked at me and said, "It's only light rain. It won't bother you."
Yeah, taking one for the team, huh?
But it was a fact that she was comfortable. She had heard from the staff that the best place to watch the fireworks was not from the balcony, the Truman balcony on the south portico of the White House, but up on the roof. So she decided to come up, and when she saw me and my daughter, she just decided that that was what she was going to do, to watch the fireworks with the staff on the roof of the White House.
So a president takes the office on January 20th after they get elected. How long, in your 7 presidents' experience, how long did it take for them to get comfortable with the residents?
It usually takes about 3 months. And the reason I say that is because the family that's coming in, the chief usher has had the opportunity to deal with that family from the day of the election until the day of inauguration, which ends up being about 5 or 6 weeks. So the foundation is laid by the chief usher with the incoming family. And so there's a relationship that goes there. But they're still in their private home. The Secret Service stops at the door. They don't go into the actual family's quarters. The maids, the butlers, the chefs, the usher's office, the florists, they're all involved in being inside those cloistered rooms that the family occupies as their private quarters. And they have to be comfortable in those rooms. It's their home for whatever time being. So we always said that usually when you walk into the room and there's a conversation going on early on in the administration, the conversation stops or there's a little pullback. Some point in the first 3 months, that doesn't happen. The conversation goes on. And the word gets passed, we're uncomfortable with the family and the family can trust us. The other thing that trust is a big part. You never heard stories about the first family coming from the resident staff. And that's a tribute to the people who work there. As I said, they work for the presidency, not the president.
Who was in charge of the jelly beans on Reagan's Oval Office desk? That was you? Did he have a brand that he liked?
The jelly beans?
Yeah.
Jelly Bellies.
He was all about the Jelly Bellies.
Yes, and the way that came about was on the day of the inaugural, I got a call from the president's office, from his staff, and they said, the president's going to have a cabinet meeting tomorrow in the cabinet room. And he always starts off his meetings like he did it when he was governor in California, with a jar of jelly beans that he passes around to break the ice, to get everybody talking. So we need to have a jelly beans jar. And of course, the White House inventory didn't include a jelly bean jar. So I gave the housekeeper the direction to go right then to the local store down in Washington and find what she could. And she came back with a biscuit jar made by Orfor's, I believe, is the manufacturer. And it had a top on it. And we took it over and presented it. They filled it up with jelly beans, and sure enough, there it was on the table the next day.
And to this day, we still sell jars of Jelly Belly jelly beans with the Ronald Reagan signature on them at our White House Historical Association shop.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think is there another president in your tenure that had that kind of signature, whether it was a treat or.
Well, back when I first started at the White House, it was cigarettes.
Oh.
Cigarettes were still prominent at that time, and one of the things we had presidential packs of cigarettes that had the presidential seal on them, and more importantly, that everybody could take was the matchbooks.
Yes. Yeah.
That had the presidential seal with them, and they were passed out up until White House became smokeless. And all those ashtrays went away.
Can you imagine how many cigarettes burns were on, couches in the Oval?
Didn't count them.
There were a lot, huh? Oh my gosh, we're having an amazing conversation with Gary Walters and Stewart McLaurin here about life in the modern White House. It's a free event tonight at the Jefferson, 7:00. Again, it is amazing. The former White House Chief Usher, the executive residence, is Gary, presidential historian Stewart McLaurin here. Stay with us. It's Talk Erie and the Joel Natale Show. News is next. Fascinating conversation on the Joel Natale Show, live from our Kingdom Financial Group studio here. We are talking to Gary Walters, the former White House Chief Usher of the executive residence, the longest-termed Chief Usher, longest-serving, 7 presidents, and the presidential historian and the president of the White House Historical Association. Stewart McLaurin is with us here. Stewart, I'm sorry to bring in like movies and stuff, but that's how most of us know about the White House, right? We saw Lincoln. We saw the West Wing, if you will.
Well, it was really not until that famous walk and talk that Jackie Kennedy did with CBS on Valentine's Day during the Kennedy presidency that Americans saw the interior of the White House. Not only was it aired on CBS, but ABC and NBC carried it as well. It was as if the entire nation saw her sharing the People's House with the American people. And she also had published, for the very first time at our organization, to publish the first guidebook of the White House, so you could see what the building was like and know what you were experiencing when you did a tour of the White House.
Mm-hmm.
And we just published the 27th edition of that book. So and incidentally, today is Mrs. Kennedy's birthday. It would have been her 97th birthday today, and she was the founder of our organization. And thanks to her, so many of the processes and procedures that are in place that Gary would have worked with on day in and day out for conservation, preservation, acquisition for the White House collection, taking care of the fine and decorative arts and furnishings, was put in place by Mrs. Kennedy, and every president and first lady have benefited from that since then. And a key part of that is the White House Historical Association. We're nonpartisan. Our job is the same regardless of who the president is. We are nonprofit. We don't have any government funding. We're completely privately funded. So traditionally, Gary and his successors would reach out to us in the beginning of the fiscal year and say, we would like to do these things during the course of the year, and we would need this amount of funding, and we would provide those resources to make that happen. So when anything goes wrong in the White House, whether a tassel is missing or there's a worn rug or something is out of place, there are resources available to fix it right away. And nothing against our English friends or others, but you go in 10 Downing Street, you go in Buckingham Palace, and things tend to be frayed and worn. And
interesting.
And that's because they depend on the Parliament to fund those things. And that's not always a popular thing to do. But Mrs. Kennedy put in place this system, which is unique in the world, that helps maintain the White House at a museum standard. And so Gary and his colleagues are right there on the front lines every day, caring for the first family, caring for this collection, and our role is to help support them as best we can with private resources.
Tell me, Gary, and I'm going to have you put headphones on. We're going to take a phone call here in a second. But tell me the interface of the White House tour public. Was there ever a situation where a member of the first family would connect with somebody on the tour?
Yes. In fact, early on when I talked with each family, I suggested that from time to time, that especially the first ladies, they might want to go behind on the screen on the ground floor. The tourists would come in from the east side, come in on the ground floor, past the library and the Vermeer room and the China room, and then they'd go up the stairs to the first floor where the public rooms are, the colored rooms that most people think about, the East Room, red room, green room, blue room, and the state dining room. That's the public area. Well, at that base of that stairs, when the family came in, or when the tourists came in, I suggested that the first ladies from time to time go out past the screens that are blocking view down that hall, that long hall, and just surprise the tourists. And quite a few of the first ladies, and even the presidents did it sometimes.
Is that right?
Much to the chagrin of the Secret Service. But they would pop through and say, I'm just going to go see, especially if there were children, they could hear children, they might walk through and just say hello. Yeah. And it's amazing, when they went back home to Iowa or California or wherever
Arkansas.
they went, the local television stations would pick up on that, and it was a benefit for the image of the first family living in the White House, but also was just a wonderful thing for the first ladies and the presidents from time to time to do that and recognize the American people that were coming through the house that the American people paid for.
Yeah.
And with what Stewart said a moment ago, one of the things that I always tried to do was make sure that the executive residence budget included money to take care of the furnishings and what we knew about. And luckily, the Historical Association had the wherewithal through the years to back that money up.
Yeah.
But I never wanted the government to be out from under the responsibility for maintaining the White House.
Yeah. Put those headphones on. We're going to try to grab a phone call here. Hi, you're live on Talk Erie with our guests. Go ahead.
I'm so sorry I jumped in a little late. If I understand correctly, we have a historian and a former or a present usher from the White
A
House?
former usher, yes. Yeah, go ahead.
Former usher. So I'd like to ask a quick question and maybe do a quick follow-up. Which presidents did the usher serve under? I'm just curious.
Nixon to the second Bush administration.
Okay. So then I'll leave with this. I really like Richard Nixon. That was a good man right there. But I'm curious what the Nixon White House was like, maybe compared to other White Houses. And number two, if it goes political, it does. I'm just curious about you guys, both of your thoughts on the demolition and reconstruction of the East Wing. I'll hang up and listen, okay?
Thanks so much. So Nixon, here's your first.
Well, President Nixon, I was a police officer at that time.
Okay, yeah, right.
In the Secret Service, and I dealt with the family tangentially, but from time to time I would go out and deal with the first family. They were a family.
Yeah.
They had children that lived in the White House, grown daughters, and
They had a wedding at the White House?
exactly. And it is a family, and that's one of the reasons I said that earlier, that I wrote the book, is I want the White House to become something other than a political entity. I'd like to have it be known as the home of the family that is our president's family, and see what the scenes, what it's like behind the scenes, if you will, the curtains. The curtains are drawn back a little bit, without giving away any secrets.
Sure.
That is.
Yeah.
And as far as construction has been heavy. We talked already about the 1948 to 52 renovation when President Truman moved out, and the White House was completely
How major
rebuilt.
was the Kennedy construction? Was that not so much? I mean, what did she did some upgrades. Wasn't really construction. It must have been more the furnishings, right?
Yeah, she undertook a effort to indicate and get period furniture for each of those rooms that I talked about, the color rooms, blue, green, and red rooms, and get specific periods that were dealing with the age and the presidents who may have been in office at the time, and deal with the furnishings in that period. And she made a wonderful effort working with the curators around the country and philanthropy, people that were willing to donate furniture. Most of the furniture that she got in her short period of time, because she wasn't there very
Right.
long, were reproduction furniture.
Okay.
And one of the things that was forgotten and a talent that Mrs. Nixon had working with the curator of the White House at the time, Clem Conger, was Mrs. Nixon set out with Clem to get original pieces.
Really?
And they went to wonderful Americans who were willing to donate or turn over to the White House for short-term loans, or which became long-term loans, pieces of furniture that were actually in the White House, even dating back to the Monroe presidency. Wow. So there have been, the first ladies have been involved for quite a long time. The gentleman asked about the things, other construction. Like I said, there was added to the residence, the third floor. The West Wing was built. There was nothing but huge conservatories and partial barn, if you will,
is that right?
where the animals were kept
Yeah.
on the west side of the house. So those were torn down, and the West Wing was built. And so there's always some kind of construction going on around the White House. All the presidents, President Ford had the swimming pool that was installed during his time there. So there's been an awful lot of construction going on at the White House through the years.
Yeah. We were mentioning, again, Spielberg's Lincoln. Where would they have had those cabinet meetings, the team of rivals? Where was that before the West Wing?
Well, that would be what do we call the Lincoln bedroom today, would have been the president's office and cabinet room at that time. There was no West Wing. The family lived on the same floor where the president and his senior staff worked. And that was the case up until the presidency of Theodore Roosevelt. And they had a wild little gaggle of kids, and Mrs. Roosevelt finally said enough is enough, and
you're out.
You're gone or we're gone. And so he built what we now call the West Wing, and the family then took over the whole of that floor. And now we have the Lincoln bedroom and sitting room. The Queen's bedroom and sitting room occupy the east end of that floor.
Talk about how long you had regular petitioners at the White House, Stewart. I mean, again, we see the scenes from the Lincoln movie. We see the scenes from the story about Garfield, where they're immediately trying to get some kind of a presence in front of the president. When did that go away?
Well, we know that the very first fence that went up at the White House was during the Jefferson presidency, so right away. And then that escalated and grew over time, but it was really up until the extreme security measures that were put in place for World War II that limited the accessibility to the White House in some way.
So early FDR, you could have knocked on the door?
Early FDR, and it was not unusual for the president to have large public gatherings on New Year's Day that lasted into the 20th
That's
century.
right. That was like a tradition to
Yes, it was
accept
a tradition.
the citizens on New Year's, right?
Today, we still have the largest gathering every year is the White House Easter egg roll on Easter Monday. 25,000 or so kids and families will come to that. Of course, you go through a very rigid security protocol for that. But it is a place of large family gatherings and accessibility in the spring and the fall. There are the garden tours where the gardens and the lawns of the White House are open to the public. Really a wonderful opportunity. Those are ticketed for free through the National Park Service. So there are opportunities to see and experience the house up close that are very important, I think, for Americans to take advantage of.
And the first family was Adams to live in the White House,
That's right. George Washington is the only president of our 45 men who've held that role who did not live in the building. But he selected the plot of land. He hired the young Irish immigrant designer and builder, James Hoban, who designed and built the White House. Yeah. Hoban, a remarkable story of this Irish immigrant that Washington met in Charleston, South Carolina. He comes to the federal city and lays the cornerstone in 1792. The house is built enough for the Adams to move in 1800. And then Hoban lingers and builds the south portico with James Monroe, the north portico with Andrew Jackson. He then stays and works on other editions of the White House, certainly when it's rebuilt after the War of 1812. But when he dies in 1831, he spent over almost 40 years of his life working around this home. Yeah. And no one knows his name, but the world knows the product of his life's work by three words: the White House.
It's interesting in the HBO series, John Adams, Abigail Adams is not real happy about being there. She misses.
Well, it was a mud pit still.
It was a mud pit.
What we now see is Lafayette Park in front of the White House was a construction zone with enslaved workers, free workers, stonemasons and artisans from Europe. And they would haul stone up the Potomac River from Aquia, Virginia, offload it and drag it over to what we now call Lafayette Park. And they worked there. It was a construction zone. And so when they moved in, it was not a pristine garden front yard. It was essentially a house that had just been completed enough to move in. The lore is that even the East Room was still somewhat open air, so she would hang her laundry in the East Room to dry.
Unreal. I got to talk about, state dinners and things. Sure. Gary, was that always a kind of all hands on deck, be at the best behavior kind of moment?
Always. That was a primary responsibility of the social secretary and working with the First Lady and designing what was going to be done. And then they'd pass it on to me and the staff that was there. We had 7 butlers on the White House staff. We had 120 people for dinner, for state dinner. So obviously we had a lot of outside people that we had to bring in. Of course, all those people were vetted by the Secret Service. Most of them had worked there for years and years on a part-time basis. And we were able to put that all together. And I can't give enough tribute to the staff and their professionalism and what they were capable of doing. When we did picnics on the South Lawn for 1,800 people, obviously we had to have more than 7 butlers to take care of that. Right. And the kitchens at the White House, when most people see them, our jaw just hits the floor because it's so small.
Really?
It's not as large as any corporate activity would be in a hotel. It's very small, and it's amazing what they accomplish in that small area.
Would they bring in special chefs? I mean, what was the vibe that way?
My feeling was that the White House chefs were the grandest people in the world as culinarians, and I always advised the first ladies they had the ability to do that, but I didn't think that they should, because quite frequently the people they bring in are well known and they have a lot of publicity associated with them, and the event would cease to be the First Lady's event and the President's event and become that chef's event. Right. So I always voted against bringing in outside people to do state dinners.
Joel, Gary mentioned the picnics on the South Lawn, and this is the 25th anniversary of 9/11, and Gary was Chief Usher at that time, and there was a grand picnic scheduled for that very day. Wow. That is a compelling story for Gary to share, if he would.
Well, the President and the First Lady were going to host that evening. The President was going to return from Florida. The First Lady was in Washington, and they were going to host the entire Congress, Senate, the whole Congress, members, their families, their senior staff of the Congress and the Senate, and all the President's cabinet, with the one that stays away in case a catastrophe happens.
Yes.
And it was going to be on the South Lawn, and the South Lawn was completely covered with over 180 250-pound picnic tables, solid wood picnic tables, chuck wagons, because it was going to be a dinner that was President and Mrs. Bush had chosen a group from Texas called the Perini Ranch, people who did barbecues in large
something
people.
Right out of Yellowstone or something. Yeah,
and that's why when the attack in New York took place, I knew at that point the President of the United States was going to come back to the White House. And with the White House having been evacuated, I was able to keep 6 people behind, and we spent the whole day on the South grounds hand-moving all those picnic tables to open up a space for the helicopter to be able to land on the White House grounds. And then in addition, we had to get ready for the President to give the speech, the national speech to the American people that night. So it was a pretty active day for those of us who were there. And in fact, the meals that were being prepared, which had been pre-prepared in some cases, I actually made those meals available with the help of 5 people that I had in the kitchen: a butler, one of my assistant ushers, one of the housemen, and one of the operations crew in the kitchen with the chef. And they served 600 meals to the people who stayed behind at the White House, the national security staff, the Secret Service, both the uniform division and the officers, and the people, the military, who could not leave the White House. They were going to be there. And we served 600 meals out of that small kitchen that night. So there was an awful lot going on at the White House, even though it was evacuated.
Yeah. I'm just down to my last minute or so. I'd like you both to weigh in about the concept of the People's House. You kind of alluded to it already, but what the average Erieite, what kind of pride should we be taking into the White House?
Extraordinary pride. There are about 8 billion people on this planet. They will certainly, vast majority never come to our country. If they do, they won't go to the White House. The vast majority of those people won't even meet an American in their lifetime. Imagine that. But they know the symbol of that house, and they know the meaning of that house and what it represents about our country. Presidents come and go, and the beauty and the story of this book, The White House, The History of an American Idea, is that the House does undergo physical changes from presidency to presidency. But it's the idea of our country, the idea of our presidency, the peaceful transition of power from president to president to president that is what we are all about. My favorite quote of our founder, First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy, is the White House belongs to the American people. Doesn't belong to the Reagans or the Bushes or the Roosevelts or the Lincolns or the Trumps or the Bidens. It belongs to the people who are listening to this program.
If I could add one thing to that, the importance of the White House around the world was brought to my mind immediately with the wonderful patriots on the airplane that crash landed because of their activities in
Shanksville.
excuse me, in Shanksville. Pennsylvanians all, for the most part. And the fact that the White House image, I believe that that plane was not going to the Capitol the way some people do. I thought that plane was coming to the White House. And one of the reasons I say that is back when Boris Yeltsin stood on a tank in Russia when they were the Iron Curtain was coming apart. He stood in front of their parliament building and he said to the Russian people, "This is our White House." He didn't say this is our capital. He said this is our White House. And that has always stuck with me as what the world thinks about the White House.
Gary Walters, the longest-serving chief usher of the White House, and Stewart McLaurin, the president of the White House Historical Association and presidential historian. Thank you, gentlemen. 7 o'clock tonight at the Jefferson for more great conversation. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.